What's going on YouTube? This your boy Haywood Haynes. It's another installment of Facts Over Feelings. FOF Squad, leave your feelings at the door so we can get to the facts. And if you're like me and you've been paying attention to what's been going on, you may just be a little disappointed. Obviously, because one of the things that we talked about before in the last video, we're talking about mental preparedness, and we know we got a lot of individuals out there that are relatively young, mentally and physically speaking, but they still have yet to realize that, as we said before, what you do impacts all of us. And that's one of the reasons why we have to move as a body. We have to move as one as much as we possibly can. And, I know that seems like a fleeting concept because it seems as if the vast majority of people now are being strung along, and it makes it a lot harder to tell people, something that goes against the narrative, because like we said before, this is what I feel like most people, they desire this outcome. They really want it. They thrive in inequity. They thrive in chaos. And me, on the other hand, I know that struggle and stress is necessary to build character, but this shows that this is necessary in order to complete an agenda. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to touch on something that I think that we marginalize quite often, and many times we may even find ourselves talking about it or mention it in deep conversation, but rarely do we allow it to really take over us, to really get us charged and to captivate our mind, and to really be the very thing that causes us to feel inspired every day that we wake up, because we understand exactly what we're up against, right? We're up for the challenge because now we know. And so we don't take serious, what am I saying? We don't take serious the fact that these people they're adept and they're exceptional at planning and executing that plan, because they're committed. And what makes that commitment so strong is that they're ready to sacrifice. And I'll touch on that a little bit later too, just to give you an example of that, and I'll tie all of that in. But one of the things that, when we look at the relationship between China and Western powers, because that's including the Great Britain and the United States, because they've all played a role. All right. And so what have we learned? We learned in the advent of the 19th century, which would be the early 1800s, you had the opium trade, gaining a lot of traction between the British and China. And so what happened is that the emperor of China began to realize that it was destabilizing his country. It was tearing his people apart, tearing families apart. So he took extreme measures. And what were those measures? Was to outlaw the smoking of opium and the trade and the production and the manufacturing of opium, right? So who took offense to it? The European. He felt like, what? I can't sell my opium. I'm making way more money off of it than I was trading you silver, because then at that time, the Chinese emperor was accepting silver for tribute from his people. So the British had silver, and in return, the Chinese would give them tea, amongst other things, right? And so what happened, as I said, as time went on, and you get to the 1830s, by that time, they're so addicted to selling the Chinaman opium, and they're so obsessed with the proceeds that they want to continue it. And like I said, measures were taken, and then with that was more or less an act of war, according to Europeans, because then they invaded China, and then you have the first Opium Wars, which were from 1839 to 1842, culminating into the last Opium War, the Second Opium War, which ended in 1860. Now think about that. They also had a civil war about to break out in the United States around 1860, from 1861 to 1865. Notice these timelines. You see, you have to understand that. That's why Dr. Ben said, as a historian and as someone who wants to critically analyze our position, you have to know history, and you have to know that history has a dramatic effect on the present and the future. I mean, it sounds simple, but people really do not internalize that. So with that being said, we look at the fact that through the Opium Wars, the British were able to access China via Hong Kong. So they signed, or they had them commit to a 99-year lease. 99 years, okay? They would lease out Hong Kong and 200 islands and territories, okay? And then in 1997, with the contract and obliging the contract, they give Hong Kong its independence. And also, when you take a look at the argument, when you hear Western powers say, oh, well, yeah, Hong Kong is being threatened and China is trying to annex Hong Kong into its way of doing things, and we fear that Hong Kong is, in danger of losing itself because of it, that's all propaganda. So you're telling me that Hong Kong was only doing well when it was under your graces, when it was under your control, when you were steering the ship. But see, these are the type of people that you're dealing with. And so what I wanted you to take out of that was, they're planning. And so what do we understand with that type of planning? And we say that this is a critical part of their nature. So if a critical part of their nature is planning, then you know that nothing you see on TV is random. Nothing. Okay? So when we take a look at, let's just jump right into George Floyd. So when, not to mention when we take a look at some of the things, and I'm just going to throw the information out there because I know a lot of people are like, oh, hey, Rue, you be all into the numbers and all of that. But then, like I told you before, if you don't know the world is ruled by signs and symbols, I can't help you. But what we'll do is we'll take a lot of that out of that. And we'll just go about the information, or giving you the information that we've all come across. Maybe some of you have gotten this, maybe some of you have not. But to me, if you come across this information and you put it all together, and then you still don't think that there are some discrepancies, or you still don't think that, this makes sense, then I really can't help you. But let's just jump right into it. Now, one of the things that kind of tripped me out that first hit me was when you take a look at who these people are affiliated with, right? So we know that this guy came from the 3rd Ward of Houston. He makes his way to Minneapolis. He did some prison time, but he went to Minneapolis to start his life over, right? Now, we know of this guy named Steven Jackson, who's an NBA basketball, or was an NBA basketball player, right? So if you were born in 2000, 2005, you may or may not know him. He was a decent basketball player, had a legit career, but obviously not a superstar, got on superstar status, but he was a credible player. Now, the thing is that this guy, obviously, as we can see, part of some podcasts, I'm assuming that he's not broke. He's still doing fairly well. Now, it doesn't make sense to me that after you had already declared that this man has changed his life, he moved to Minneapolis for a new start, that in the event, because you're calling him, you're saying that he's your brother. That's a big statement. Y'all saying y'all brothers, or we even looked alike, and y'all have an uncanny resemblance. I mean, when people look at the photos, they think that these guys are family members. So if you're that close, and and you're trying to lead us to believe that you're that close, what in the hell would this man have to be doing, to not get assistance from you? Why in the hell is he spending a counterfeit $20 bill in a grocery store? You see what I'm saying? That's the first thing that'll jump out to me. NBA basketball players, this guy's ready to come to your defense now and talk about the grave injustice and all of this different stuff, but yet you couldn't send him $100? You couldn't make sure your man was right? Now, mind you, you said this is when he changed his life. This is when he goes to Minneapolis to change his life. You can't get your man right? I digress. All right, so what do we see? We see this man still, supposedly from what the narrative is, according to The Sun, they say that this guy still sits in his car after he had attempted to spend the $20. We don't know whatever came of that. We don't know, because all of the footage and the body cam film had been, or footage had been redacted, which means that it's been edited. All right. So, but we're used to that because it's the same thing in Ahmaud Arbery case. They're giving you 2 or 3 videos and they giving you one every 2-3 weeks. Okay. So we're used to that. We know that they're trying to build up a saga. Now, the thing is that one thing that we realize, which is overly obvious, racism is so strong that this officer by the name of Derek Chauvin or whatever, he's so intent on killing this man, he doesn't have on a face mask. He's like, the hell with the corona. Got no face mask and no gloves on. But yet you had a Detroit bus driver who happened to die from the coronavirus, all because one man wasn't wearing a mask, supposedly, on his bus. And he didn't want to get infected, right? But these 4 officers, no, they have no gloves, no mask on. They're not afraid of holding some guy down with his knee on his neck for about 8 or 9 minutes, they say. And we're so racially, we're so charged, we don't even think about that. They're saying that, oh, well, okay, Corona, you take a back seat. We about to kick off these race riots. Because all we're saying is those are part of the establishment, which would include law enforcement. Isn't it important for them to set the example? They're complaining about Trump. Now, I'm not a Trump supporter or advocate. I'm just saying that look at the hypocrisy. You're complaining about, oh, yeah, and then all of a sudden, what are you going to do? You're going to do damage control and say one of these officers now got coronavirus because they were awfully close for an awfully long time. Where's your contact tracing now? Where's you hitting them on their phone, letting them know that they too close? You see what I'm saying? But you see how, they totally ignored the COVID-19 and then brought it back, obviously, because they had to juggle both, to create this chaos that we find ourselves so acquainted with now. But the thing is that that's one thing that we didn't realize. George Floyd had on no mask. He had on no mask, and the other officers didn't have on no mask. So obviously arresting this man for spending a counterfeit $20 bill and killing him was more important than even being susceptible to catching COVID-19. They weren't even worried about COVID-19. It's supposed to be a deadly pandemic scourging the earth. And yet these officers running around more concerned about putting their knees on somebody's neck. Now, the crazy part about it is this guy works security too as well. Now, he works security at a club called Nueve Rodeo with Derek Chauvin. Now, they also say that they didn't know each other. I'll leave that up to you to decide. All right. Now, we also know that, this guy is supposed to be a racist, right? And it's incredible to know that someone who's a racist is married to an Asian woman. Yeah, yep. His wife escaped from Laos, and her family fled to Thailand, eventually ended up in the United States. She's an Asian. She was Miss Minnesota. All right. So a racist man that is married to an Asian that is not scared of the corona and was more concerned about killing the black guy. Okay. Now it makes kind of sense. So they show you a picture of him in this hat that some people still believe is Derek Chauvin, right? The police officer. And it's Make Whites Great Again hat, right? No, negative. According to Scopes, they say that this guy is a guy by the name of Jonathan Riches, who is an online troll who has done time in federal prison and is notorious for filing lawsuits. All right. This guy was also at the Bill Cosby trial giving away Jell-O. Like I said, the truth will do two things. It will piss you off. And what else would it do? It would be stranger than fiction. All right. This guy, Jonathan Riches, he claims that it is him that is in the hat. Now, he bears an uncanny resemblance and liking to Derek Chauvin. So what's the chances of two of these individuals having doppelgangers? One guy looking exactly like Steven Jackson, the basketball player, and one guy looking exactly like a guy who's an online troll who's photobombed Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton in their photos. And was also interviewed when he had Jews for Trump on. So he's been known as a Trump supporter. All right. And so that's the guy named Jonathan Riches. And he has a grandmother by the name of Christina Caldwell, who also posted screenshots and said, oh, look what Jonathan did. He got him again. All right. So if you're still under the belief or under the assumption that that's Derek Chauvin in that hat, in that photo where it says Make Whites Great Again, that is not him. That is a guy named Jonathan Riches. All right. Now, what's also fascinating is that, when you take a look at the attorney by the name of Benjamin Crump. Benjamin Crump was attorney for Ahmaud Arbery, Mike Brown. He was the attorney for Trayvon Martin. And now he's the attorney for George Floyd family. Wow. And we just look like we don't care. We don't care when we're taking a look at this information. And see, the thing is that also what you notice and what was tripping me out was the incident with the tanker on I-35. All right. There was a tanker. Now, the numbers, I just had to say the numbers because, like I said, if you don't get it, man, I don't know. But it was unreal to me. They're like, oh, okay, at around 6 p.m., 6,000 protesters were marching, and this is 6 days after the murder of George Floyd. Okay, all right. Now, according to reports, this guy drives a tanker, and I think he has some Russian name or something like that, but he's driving a tanker down I-35, and they say that he's not about to stop. Well, how did he stop? He didn't run out of gas, so what made him stop? Okay? So he ends up being pulled out of the tanker. Protesters get a little rowdy, but then they hand him over to the police. Okay? They're civil when they need to be, right? For the operation, for the PSYOP, right? Civil when they need to be. Now, of course, they showed a little frustration, but then end up handing him over. Even some protesters got involved to make sure that the guy was handed over to the police. Police ends up releasing him from their custody because this guy says he had no ill intent and didn't know what he was doing. So they end up releasing him, but the question, it begs the question, according to the Sun, that the police had a blockade, had basically shut off, cut off the interstate so that the protesters could march down I-35, right? So they shut that down at 5 o'clock. The incident happened between 5:30 and 6 o'clock. So how did the driver of the tanker get through the police blockade? Come on, bro. I mean, like I said, straight PSYOP. This is ultimately, I think that, one of the things that always has me upset is because, we have become pure reactionaries and we don't understand that that's one of the things that is helping us to dig our own grave. Now, when let me see. One of the things that I was, I think I don't know if I don't know who I was talking to at the time, but they were talking about what if Trump would take some action. And they were citing that because of civil disobedience or rebellion, or the failure for the state to be able to execute its laws, will give Trump the reason to, or give him the justification to employ federal troops. Now some people are like, oh, that's Posse Comitatus, and he has no right to do that. And then some cited the Insurrection Act of 1807. So this is what you have to understand in a nutshell. Okay, there's two federal laws on the books that people cite. One is Posse Comitatus, and that was in 1878. Right, Posse Comitatus states that the United States can't, or the federal government can't mobilize federal troops against the public, right? But a lot of people don't realize, when you dig deeply, that the Posse Comitatus was specifically directed toward the Army. Okay, and in 1956 they made an amendment that also included the Air Force, but that doesn't include the Navy, that doesn't include the Marines, even though the Department of the Navy has regulations that state that they will abide by regulations set in place to where it's akin to measures akin to the Posse Comitatus, where they respect it, but they're not legally bound to it. Okay, so that's one thing that you need to know. And so that also means that that doesn't apply to the National Guard that the states have, and a state could also request the National Guard or assistance from the National Guard from another state. That doesn't include the Space Force or whatever that garbage is, even though that's under the Department of the Air Force. You see what I'm saying? That doesn't include, Homeland Security, none of those things. So we have to understand that the Posse Comitatus is limited. All right. And then also you have him working off what was called the Insurrection Act of 1807. So the Insurrection Act gives the president the power to, like we said, enforce law and to bring the military might of the federal forces upon the American people, if like we said, if it compromises the state's ability and the federal government's ability to enforce law and to maintain civility. Now, this is, something that they think is alien and something new. Once again, I'm not a Trump supporter, but like I said before, this is what they do in order to create chaos, because most people are not aware of history, right? So they say, oh yeah, Trump, the law of the Insurrection Act of 1807, that's all. Wow, he using that. No, they've used it. A lot of people have used it. A lot of presidents have used it already. Okay, you had Andrew Jackson use it during the Nat Turner Rebellion. All right, you had Dwight D. Eisenhower use it to desegregate the Little Rock Nine. All right, you had Lyndon B. Johnson use it in 4 cities. He used it in Baltimore, Washington, D.C. He used it in Chicago, and he used it in Detroit during the 67 riots. Franklin Delano Roosevelt used it in the 43 riots in Detroit. Okay, and you had President Kennedy use it in the Ole Miss riots. All right. So there is a number of presidents that have already been established. So don't act like what Trump doing is alien. This is the measures that they would take. And this is the measures that we're buying into. Look what happened. I mean, there were protests in my city, or close to where I'm at, in Michigan, in Kalamazoo. And, they have reports that somebody threw one brick through a window. Now, look, curfew is at 7 p.m. With the corona, it was at 12. You see? So this is what we're saying. You got to be thinkers. You got to be thinkers. Even in Ahmaud Arbery, it's insane how, the representation, the lawyers, it's all in this. And we'll talk about that a little bit because, with Benjamin Crump, you fail to realize, like, man, I told you about the gatekeepers. We're all aware. And like I said, if you're not up to speed about who the Boule is and that the world is ruled by signs and symbols, then go to someone who will help teach you the fundamentals, then come back to this channel. And then, we'll take it from there. But the reality of it is that these guys are part of fraternities. Now, ironically enough, he's a part of a fraternity called Psi-Phi. And it sounds sci-fi, but it's actually spelled Psi-Phi, Psi-Phi, right? And so one of the oldest fraternities, black fraternities with Greek lettering to date from Howard University. Okay, now if you go and look up, the sci-fi fraternity, you'll look at all of the incidents where, I mean, you talking about 5, 10 brothers, I'm assuming because it's a black fraternity, died during hazing. Not to mention lawsuits, 24 convicted because they were forcing individuals or initiates to eat dog food and vomit and to jog 7 miles, and they were dying. Because what you failed to realize, remember we talked about these gatekeepers and their allegiances, there's a new life that will be given to them. So they have to at least show that they are willing to sacrifice their life in order to attain it. That's what you don't understand. You see what I'm saying? So what we're talking about is that, these psychological operations are run by people who have an allegiance that supersedes the any loyalty that you perceive that they have with you, with our people. It is non-existent. And I don't think that, we want to fully buy into that. And that's been our problem. And so, when, you take a look at all of the information, one thing that you realize is that, we got to spend this time doing things that we know is imperative for building, not getting lost in a hip hop culture that I don't know what they're talking about at all. Don't know what they're talking about at all. We can't lean to these people, lean on these people and hope that they're going to give us clarity of any kind. They're just as lost. If not, if they are knowledgeable, then they're withholding pertinent information from you purposely in order to mislead and misguide you, to keep you in such a disoriented state of affairs that you feel like there is no other way but to submit. And nothing could be furthest from the truth. Nothing could be the furthest from the truth. So when, like we said before, when we talk about the measures that have been taking place with other biological weapons that we allow to slide past us, even like we talked about before, we talked about HIV, and we noticed that, it was individuals like Margaret Hackler and Dr. Robert Gallo who made this a real thing. And substantiated it through the media and nowhere else. And then so we have to ask ourselves as black people, considering the fact that they even the scientific community has stated, even regardless of what argument that you choose to back, one thing that you do know is that the origins are mysterious for HIV. They don't know where it came from. And then they posit that it came from a monkey or some animals, right? And so we have to understand this. This is the big thing from that, without even going into a scientific argument or debate. You know that it didn't start with you, black people, so why did it end up with you? You know that it didn't start with you, so why have you became the face of the disease? Just like coronavirus, you know that it didn't start with you. You know that for a fact. The whole world knows that right now. While it's fresh in people's memory, you know that it didn't start with you. So how did it end up with you? See, because one of the things that we failed to realize, like we talked about, like I was going to do before, we have no problem highlighting the weaknesses of black people. Oh, they're at the height of diabetes, osteoporosis, heart disease, strokes, cancer, this, that, and the other. And, we take it on the chin. And then, but one of the things that we don't do is we can never highlight other people's weaknesses. That is the thing. So when we say that, according to the International Agency for Cancer Research, which is an affiliate of the World Health Organization, 1 European dies every hour from skin cancer. That's 24 Europeans a day from skin cancer, just from being out in the sun alone. Okay? We said that when their scientists look through UV cameras and white people put on sunscreen lotion or suntan or sunscreen protective lotion, that it's akin to putting on blackface. They look like they put on blackface. So they have to put on an imitation version of you in order to survive. So when you hear about this geoengineering of the earth is too warm for who? Too warm for who? See, you didn't understand, like Dr. Francis Wilson told you. If you don't understand that these measures are measures of genetic survival, that they have to engineer this planet to make it suitable for their existence, everything else about them will confuse you. What do you not get? This is not about division. See, somebody said, oh, well, hey, Heru, you're on dividing. I didn't divide. Nature already did the division. You came out the way that you were, naturally. Societal constructs that were created is the one that did the divide. Man was the one that divided you. He took something that was natural and exploited it. Oh, you black, so this idea. And so, see, since we don't understand the person, oh, we're all the same underneath. People will love that argument. We're not. If we were all the same underneath, we'd be the same on the top. It's made from the that interface between the dermis and the epidermis is where those melanocytes are made. And they're called migratory cells. So the new cells are made in the deepest level at the interface or that shared boundary between the dermis and the epidermis. So this is where this melanin is made and distributed all across the body. Especially, like we said, in the 6th week of development for the baby. It starts at the flank of the spine and then migrates. All right? So we know this. We know that this melanin molecule allows us to absorb 99.9% of the electromagnetic spectrum given off by the sun. That's the difference. That's the big difference. And see, once that's highlighted, all of a sudden, you're the big bad guy because you're highlighting something, but they have no problem. Nobody has any problem highlighting our weaknesses. And we own up to them. And because we have no choice. Why? Because we buy into the science. See, this is what we were saying. This is what I was saying before. How in the hell will we be able to be successful at liberation or a complete revolution when we still are captivated by their worldview? We still use their science and their theories because it's nothing more than that. Nothing more than that. So that's what I'm asking, people to understand is that, you have a long way to go if you believe everything that you see on TV. If it's hard for you to tell whether or not an individual, I'm talking about, and many times it ain't got to be a high budget film or a film that took millions of dollars in order to produce or put together. A lot of times, man, you'll see something on TV. If you have participants and people colluding together and they're acting like they're killing somebody or, I think that if a person witnessed it and didn't know what was going on, they would be misled. They would assume that that person was being attacked. They would assume that that person really actually died, and it could have been nothing more than a hoax. Because these people, like I said, will do everything in order to complete the agenda. And we have become reactionaries. We have become extremists. And so far we have yet to learn from history. When you look at the 67 riots in Detroit, look at how that city was left, and look who was to blame, and look how they were able to use it as an excuse to do what? Militarize the police. Okay? We're talking about as the whole state because you can't get lost in one city, and then that becomes a precedent for what? Other cities, and they begin to follow suit. And then before you look up, you can't tell the difference between a police officer and police officers and a SWAT team. You don't think that was by design? And then if you notice, there was the mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota, by the name of Melvin Carter, and he had said that all the arrests that they had made were from people that came from out of town. They had no clue who these people were, but we know them as agent provocateurs. You see? So we know exactly what the intent was, and we know exactly what the desired result was. And now it seems as if, regardless if you participated or not, it affects you. You have to be in the house by 7 p.m. Otherwise, you're a criminal. Otherwise, we need to know why you're out. And then, okay, if it isn't, for protesting, then we'll go back and use COVID-19. Oh, by the time this is all over with, we'll have 4 or 5 excuses as to why your ass shouldn't be outside. All right? And this is, like I said, this is what's lost, in all of this mess is clarity. And, when we start to take a look at it, and of course, I will refrain from, talking about the signs and the symbols that, we're all hidden in plain sight. But that's your job, too, as well, as you begin to dig a little bit deeper. You begin to understand that they will go to extreme measures in order to complete, the objective that they know is critical to it all. And that is, making sure that things are so chaotic that you beg and you plead for them to come save you. And they will. Or what you think it will, but it won't be. Or what you think that they're capable of doing, but it won't be. They won't be capable of doing it because, you have to realize that um, it's this way for a reason. It's this way for a reason, and because people are so emotional and we can't see past it, we have allowed them to go, to operate at full steam. And that's exactly what's going on. So that's what I'm begging you, brothers and sisters, as I, continue to keep putting up these videos. Is like we said, to continue to keep doing our research, to start taking a look at the people who are connected, the connections, the organizations that we know for a fact are not reputable organizations, to say the least, and they are designed and they were put there and they were formulated to take control over those who would they would approve in order to help them complete the agenda. And that's what we know about the Boule. So we a lot of people don't know that Howard University was named after a soldier, a white soldier from the Union Army. And Spelman College was named after, I believe, a Rockefeller, Nancy Rockefeller, or the wife of Rockefeller. So that's those institutions have been controlled and always have been and always will be. The Boule, they are the ones who are given the opportunities, and that's why we talked about before when we talked about the hazing and the rituals that they go through, and how many of them die in order to attain that that connection, or to be affiliated with these individuals, because they know that they're gaining access to a world that is not given to the average man and woman.